You walk into the room. The air feels light. You smile, they smile back. There's warmth in the exchange, like old friends meeting again, even if you've just met. Words flow easily. Laughter bubbles up in between stories. Everything feels relaxed, natural, familiar. It's the kind of interaction that feels safe on the surface, charming, effortless, even comforting. But when you walk away, that warmth begins to fade, and in its place comes a strange, quiet discomfort. It's not something loud or obvious. It creeps in slowly, like a whisper in the back of your mind. You tell yourself you're just tired, but it's not just tiredness. It's heavier. It settles in your chest and begins to stir your thoughts. You replay the conversation in your head over and over, trying to figure out what shifted. You begin to doubt yourself. Did you say too much? Did you laugh too loud? Were you too open or not open enough? A fog rolls in, one of second guessing, one that makes you shrink from the inside out. You start to feel like maybe you were the problem, even though no one said anything cruel. And that's the strange part, because everyone seemed nice, friendly, kind, and yet you feel exposed, like something was quietly taken from you while you were distracted by the smiles. You assume you'd recognize real harm if it showed up. You believe that people with bad intentions look a certain way, that they're rude, cold, or aggressive. But that's the illusion we've been taught to trust. The truth is much more unsettling. The most damaging forms of manipulation and emotional harm often come wrapped in softness. They come through people who seem welcoming, people who know how to mirror your energy, who say the right words, with the right expressions, and offer just enough warmth to lower your guard. They don't confront you, they comfort you. They don't frighten you, they disarm you. And that's why they're so hard to see coming. They hide in plain sight, behind laughter, eye contact, and compliments. Sometimes, the very people who drain your spirit the most are the ones who never raise their voice. They just slowly pull apart your sense of self, one smile, one nod, one well-placed comment at a time. And by the time you feel the damage, you've already convinced yourself that it was you. Carl Jung talked about a very subtle kind of threat, not one that comes from someone trying to hurt you on purpose, but from deep, unresolved wounds that never got the attention they needed. These people carry inner storms they've never faced head-on. They've never looked honestly into the dark, empty spaces inside their own minds and hearts. That emptiness doesn't just disappear or heal by itself. Instead, it lingers, searching for someone else to fill that space, someone else to carry the weight it refuses to bear. And often, the person chosen to hold this unseen burden is you. This isn't about blaming anyone or putting labels on others. It's about waking up from a kind of unconscious sleep where we don't see what's really happening. It's about learning to recognize the energy that slowly drains you, not because it's obvious or cruel, but because it hides behind a mask. Sometimes it shows up as concern, appearing caring and gentle. Sometimes it feels like affection, wrapping you in what seems like warmth and kindness. But here's the truth, it's not really about you at all. It's pain that's been ignored and buried, looking desperately for something, someone, a surface to project itself on. And sadly, that surface becomes your emotional world, your peace, your sense of safety. How often have you walked away from a conversation feeling like you're carrying an invisible weight, heavy, confusing, and impossible to explain? How many times have you found yourself saying sorry, not because you were wrong, but simply to keep the peace and avoid conflict? How many moments have passed where you ended up cleaning emotional messes that didn't belong to you, patching up feelings that someone else neglected to handle? This isn't just about a misunderstanding or poor communication. It's something deeper, a quiet psychological invasion that creeps into your spirit. Jung described this as projection, the painful act of someone who cannot confront their own hidden fears, guilt, or shame, and instead pushes those dark feelings onto the closest person who shows kindness. Usually, that person is someone like you, someone naturally soft, empathetic, and open-hearted. It's not because you're vulnerable or fragile, but because your openness creates a space where others can offload their inner chaos. This invisible transfer can leave you drained, confused, and questioning your own reality, as if you're carrying the burden of someone else's brokenness without even realizing it. Yet, recognizing this is the first step toward reclaiming your emotional boundaries and protecting your own peace. And here comes a hard truth that many shy away from acknowledging. This experience isn't rare or accidental. It's not something that happens once in a blue moon. It's everywhere you look, in the bonds of friendship, within the tangled webs of family, deep inside intimate relationships, and even reflected back at you from your own self-image. Projection isn't about evil intent, it's a hidden process operating beneath awareness, unconscious and automatic. Yet, when left unchecked, this silent force spreads like a virus, infecting every corner of your emotional world. It quietly erodes trust, distorts reality, and leaves confusion in its wake, wearing down even the strongest connections over time. Today, we'll uncover 6 specific types of emotionally dangerous people, those whom Carl Jung warned us about. These individuals are not villains plotting harm, nor are they driven by malice. Instead, they unknowingly become vessels for destructive energy, unaware of the dark shadows that course through their minds and hearts. And when this unseen, unconscious force stirs inside them, it doesn't just wound their own spirit, it reaches out and touches yours, sometimes in ways you may never fully understand. This is why learning to recognize these patterns is vital, not to judge, but to protect your own well-being from being quietly consumed. Let's begin. The unconscious manipulator. This person doesn't sit in the shadows, plotting schemes or setting traps with clear intent. No, their actions are far more subtle, and yet, the damage they cause cuts just as deeply. They move through life completely unaware of the storm raging inside them. That inner chaos remains hidden, invisible even to themselves. Instead of facing their pain, they lash out in quiet, indirect ways. They weaponize silence, letting it hang heavy like a shadow between you. Guilt becomes their language, a punctuation mark placed after every interaction. Their sorrow, it's your responsibility to soothe. Their fury, something only you could have provoked. But they never lay these accusations bare. Instead, they weave a web of implications and half-spoken truths, so artfully that you end up carrying the weight of their feelings as if they were your own. To anyone observing from the outside, they may seem complex, mysterious, even deeply sensitive, someone with layers worth peeling back. But if you stand close enough, the pattern becomes clear. Their emotions always demand a scapegoat. And more often than not, that scapegoat is you. Carl Jung called this psychic blindness, a state where projection overwhelms perception, and the person loses sight of objective reality. They see only their unrecognized suffering reflected back, and nothing else. The unconscious manipulator doesn't intend to ensnare you, yet their blindness creates an invisible trap. Without the clarity of awareness, you'll find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing your actions. You might confuse losing yourself with an act of love, blurring the lines between genuine care and subtle control. But knowledge, the simple act of recognizing these patterns, becomes your lifeline. It is the key that unlocks the door to freedom, the way out of the shadows that bind you. Next, we encounter the bearer of the persona. On the surface, they are flawless, polished, courteous, and effortlessly impressive. They carry themselves with a confidence that draws admiration, the kind of person others naturally respect or even envy. Yet, when you find yourself alone with them, a strange emptiness lingers in the air. It's not about the words they choose, it's the silence in between, the absence of something real. Every interaction feels scripted, rehearsed, a performance perfected for the audience. This person lives behind a carefully constructed mask, a social identity that Carl Jung referred to as the persona, the face we show the world to fit in and be accepted. The real danger isn't in wearing this mask, it's when the mask becomes the entire self. When the genuine person inside is swallowed by the role they play. The bearer of the persona pushes away any signs of messiness, vulnerability, or unpredictability, refusing to let the world see anything less than perfect. Over time, this polished facade becomes a demand, an unspoken rule that others must also maintain a flawless exterior. They want you to present only your best moments, your cleanest stories, no cracks, no flaws, no raw truths. Being around them feels like performing in an endless play where you are cast as a character, not your true self. You start to censor your thoughts, edit your emotions, and reshape your identity just to keep the fragile peace. Gradually, without even realizing it, you begin to wear your own mask, mirroring their elegant but suffocating act. It's not a loud kind of toxicity filled with outbursts or aggression. Instead, it's a subtle, graceful form of suffocation that slowly drains your authenticity, leaving you breathless behind a veil of perfection. Then comes the owner of the repressed shadow. At first glance, they appear calm, composed, even wise beyond their years, almost saintly in their demeanor. They carry themselves with a controlled grace, showing discipline and restraint that commands respect. But beneath that carefully maintained surface lies a powerful storm, a tempest of emotions and desires that no one around them truly sees. Carl Jung explained that the shadow isn't simply the dark side of ourselves where we hide shame or anger. It's also the place where our energy, creativity, passion, and true vitality get locked away, buried deep beneath layers of denial and control. The owner of the repressed shadow builds invisible walls so high and so thick that they lose touch with these hidden parts of themselves entirely, forgetting that this shadow even exists. But the shadow never disappears. It waits patiently, biding its time, until it can no longer be contained. And when it starts to leak through those walls, it does so in ways that are subtle but unmistakable, through passive-aggressive comments that sting under polite words, through coldness that distances loved ones, through sudden flashes of anger that seem to come from nowhere, or through an unshakable sense of moral superiority that shuts down any criticism. These individuals often become relentlessly critical of others, emotionally unreachable, or trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction that nothing seems to fix. Yet, they refuse to look inward, never admitting that the source of their pain and frustration is buried deep inside themselves. When the shadow finally bursts free, and it inevitably does, it doesn't slip out quietly or gently. It crashes through with force, shaking the foundations of their relationships and leaving those closest to them caught in the fallout. The rupture isn't just emotional, it can feel like a violent storm ripping through everything familiar, leaving confusion, hurt, and broken trust in its wake. Then we encounter the possessed by archetypes. This isn't just someone playing a part for show, they've fully merged with their role, living it as if it defines their entire being. Imagine the self-sacrificing mother whose identity revolves around endless suffering, the stoic father who hardens himself against any glimpse of softness, the romantic desperate for constant praise and validation, or the savior who feels compelled to rescue everyone, even at the expense of their own needs. These aren't just personality quirks, they are ancient, powerful archetypes, what Carl Jung described as universal psychic patterns deeply embedded within all of us. But when someone becomes possessed by one of these archetypes, it's like they've locked themselves inside a cage made of expectations and rigid roles. They lose the ability to adapt or see people for who they truly are. Instead, they view everyone around them as characters in their own personal drama, actors cast into roles that serve their story. This means that your relationship with them isn't genuine anymore. You're no longer engaging with a full person but reacting to a scripted part they're trapped in. At first, this can feel strangely compelling, almost magnetic, like you've stepped into a story that pulls you in with irresistible force. But that allure fades quickly, replaced by a crushing rigidity. You start feeling confined, suffocated by the invisible walls of the role they insist you play. When you try to break free, to reveal parts of yourself that don't fit their narrative, the atmosphere shifts suddenly, either chilling into cold distance or erupting into unpredictable conflict. It's as if stepping outside their script threatens their entire world, and your freedom becomes the source of tension, misunderstanding, or outright hostility. Now, meet the psychic leech. This type rarely raises their voice or makes direct accusations. Instead, they silently absorb your energy, often without you even realizing it at first. At the beginning, they appear intensely connected, open, vulnerable, almost magnetic in their need for closeness. They share quickly, seeking intimacy, making you feel chosen, needed, even special. That craving for connection feels flattering, almost irresistible. But over time, a subtle but unmistakable drain sets in. You begin to feel empty, like your emotional reserves are quietly being siphoned away. It's as if your very presence, your joy, your calm, are slowly being consumed by this person. Carl Jung observed that those who lack a firm, stable sense of self often attempt to fill that void by leaning heavily on others for their identity. The psychic leech doesn't seek to harm intentionally. They are caught in an unconscious need to absorb the energy and emotions of those around them just to survive psychologically. No matter how much support, attention, or validation you offer, it's never enough to fill their emptiness. Because what they're truly searching for, the sense of completeness and inner strength, can't be handed over or borrowed from another person. It must be grown from within, nurtured and developed in solitude. Until then, the cycle continues, leaving you emotionally drained, tangled in a relationship where your boundaries blur, and your sense of self feels compromised. And finally, we confront the undeveloped anima or animus. Carl Jung taught that every man carries within him a hidden feminine aspect called the anima, while every woman harbors an inner masculine force known as the animus. These inner figures serve as crucial bridges to our unconscious minds, gateways to parts of ourselves we don't always understand or see clearly. But when these aspects remain undeveloped or ignored, they begin to distort the way we experience relationships. A man with an undeveloped anima might fall into the trap of idealizing women, projecting onto them the roles of muse, lover, or emotional caretaker, expecting them to fill a void or play out fantasies he hasn't faced within himself. Similarly, a woman with an undeveloped animus might either place men on a pedestal, imbuing them with unrealistic power, or feel compelled to outdo and outshine them to prove her worth. In either case, what seems like intense attraction or connection is actually a web of projections, false reflections of what's missing inside. These relationships feel powerful, fated even, charged with the kind of electric tension that pulls you in. But beneath that intensity lies illusion, not authentic closeness. They're mirrors showing us fragments of our own inner emptiness, rather than windows into another person's true self. And inevitably, when the fantasy shatters, as it always does, it leaves behind a trail of heartbreak, disappointment, bitter resentment, or cold emotional withdrawal. This is the painful cost of neglecting those hidden parts of ourselves, parts that demand recognition, integration, and healing if we ever want to experience genuine intimacy. These 6 emotionally dangerous types Carl Jung revealed are not just out there, in other people, they are shadows that live quietly within us all. They aren't meant to shame or condemn, they are invitations to look closer at the parts of ourselves we've hidden, denied, or forgotten. Every time we avoid facing our own discomfort, put on a mask to please others, blame someone else for how we feel, chase after acceptance, or lose ourselves in fantasy, we step closer to becoming these very patterns. But here's the truth that can change everything. The way out is never through fighting others, but through waking up to ourselves. It takes bravery to face what's buried deep inside, the parts we hide even from ourselves. To gently gather the broken pieces of our shadow, to peel off the roles we've worn like armor, and to claim back the energy and love we thought was lost. It's about seeing who we really are beneath the pain, beyond the story, with clear eyes and an open heart. Because the most dangerous enemy isn't the person across from you, it's the silent storm inside, the parts left in darkness, waiting to be understood. So I ask you now, not as a challenge, but as a promise, are you ready to wake up? Ready to meet yourself with kindness, courage, and truth? Because that is where freedom begins, right here, inside you.